Lawyers of Reddit, at what point, when working for a defendant, did you realize my client is a monster? A lot of years ago I used to work as a solicitor's representative. Cases go to Crown Court. Barrister deals and I am there for paperwork. Additional stuff with client etc. 70-something-year-old man had been in jail for 15 years for an assault on a child. Solicitor and barrister working on getting him released due to him getting clean reports from just about everyone. Guards took him out of jail to a dentist and as he entered the waiting room he saw 2 children and ran straight at them. Guard stopped him. 3 weeks later at court I was the one that sat him down in a room to explain that no. This isn't a hearing to release you. It is so you can be committed to a mental health secure facility for the rest of your life. He didn't take that well. Ian Albert, a legal assistant. We got a client off of a murder charge. 2 weeks later she was caught with a similar weapon and situation. Except this time the guy didn't die. Not the client but my managing partner. The client was a senile 90-year-old man. He wanted to sell land worth a little less than $1 billion to some businessmen. Suffice to say there were many who wanted to take advantage of the situation. One such person, to my dismay, was our managing partner. The partner wanted to insert a provision that would have effectively funneled about 60% of the proceeds solely to him. You could see how his eyes gleamed at the mere mention of money. The provision got lost in the revisions. I was doing the revisions. I'm no longer part of that scummy firm. My general psychology professor worked for the state of Arkansas assessing criminals to see if they would qualify as criminally insane. He told us a story one time about a guy who would get glass shards and hide them underneath his skin presumably to use at a more opportune time. I'm on the other side. But I've got a defendant who went to prison for starving 3 adopted children to the point that they needed weeks of hospitalization. Then got out of prison and married a guy with children so that she could start starving them. 2. Listening to her interview where she attempts to justify what she did to both sets of kids disturbed me more than any of the murder cases I've worked on. We had a client try and enforce a post-employment restraint against a 19-year-old receptionist after she quit and started working for a competitor. The reason? He wanted to make her life hell because she wouldn't sleep with him. Creepy 57-year-old man. Him trying to sleep with her was the reason she quit. And surprisingly he didn't take our advice to discontinue his claim and so we ended up sending him elsewhere. I listened to a 911 call where the victim's throat was slit while on the call by our client. I will never forget her gurgling and sounding like she was dying. Somehow she ultimately lived through this, saying, "He killed me. He killed me." She tried to sell her baby. I found out during a hearing. In front of the judge. The people who try to sell babies surprise me. The people who try to buy babies confound me. Oh. I can share a good story. I had a teacher in high school who was a former lawyer. We always asked him why he gave up his practice to start teaching. He finally caved and explained that his last case was the defense of 3 people. Apparently there had been a 4th. It was 2 couples. Who in the act of a drunken, drugged out orgy, decided to kill, partially eat, and dismember one of the women. I guess it seemed like a good idea at the time. As a lawyer, he said it was pretty open and shut. But he had to get his clients the best result possible. And he was exposed to all the horrid details. The pictures. And their reasoning. My teacher had such a far off look when he explained it that we could see it really got to him. The first and last family law case was assigned to me as a first-year associate. My client broke his wife's jaw. And said if they were home in Russia he would have killed her because he could pay his way out of prison there. My mom is a lawyer. This is the story about how she quit being a public defender. When you are a public defender you don't get to choose your cases. She got assigned a young man who, with the help of his friend, had gotten a kitten from a free to a good home ad in the paper. They then brought it home and gave it to their dog as a chew toy. I think they also filmed it. So yeah. She said she needed a shower after every meeting with him. cancelled her PD contract after the case concluded. I'll go ahead and say it. When I practiced family law and criminal defense, I trusted and believed my criminal defense clients 100x more than my divorce custody clients. The worst monsters are the people who manipulate minor children for custody reasons. FCK them. Luckily I'm out of that area of law. Hopefully for good. I had a client who was accused of domestic violence. Essentially he threw his girlfriend out of a second-story window. Now he's got a terrible history, but so do a lot of my clients, and his attitude is a little entitled. Also typical. But he also knows the deal and wants a plea deal. So I'm not really prepared when he absolutely refuses the no jail offer from the state. Keep in mind there were like 5 witnesses. Why? Because they wanted him to pay for her medical bills. Okay. An arsehole, but whatever, not the worst. What did it was his counteroffer. I ain't paying that bitch's bills. Tell them I'll pay for the window. Prosecutor was not happy. The first week I started at my current criminal defense firm, I was tasked with cataloging discovery from our client's phone. The phone had multiple, talking around 4,000 videos, photos, text exchanges with women under 16, though not all of the girls' ages were confirmed. Most, if not all, were under the legal age of consent, and many were barely pubescent, naked and being prostituted over 1 year. He would lure these girls in exchange for drugs. Nothing felt totally bizarre until I came across one video where he was clearly forcing himself upon a literal child who was so high on benzodiazepines, not willingly but rather forced, and choking her in the process. When our firm confronted him, he said he was in love with her and that's why he did it. He would also take these girls to hotels and make them have sex with one another while he taped. But nothing beat what I said above. Pretty horrifying stuff for my first week on the job. When this person, an executive, said she was firing any employee who had a serious illness or injury, while promoting fundraisers at a local church for cancer sufferers. No less, in part because employees, thinking she'd be sympathetic, would reveal their confidential health info to her. Defended my client in a lawsuit who defrauded his business partners. Evidence was already overwhelming that my client was liable. Client made matters worse by fabricating evidence and presenting it in court. He got called out on it by his dad's attorney who had the same evidence. It tanked my client's case. My client continued lying to me despite the overwhelming evidence showing he fabricated evidence. He lost big. In addition to a large judgment, he got hit with several felonies for fabricating evidence. Also, the business partners my client screwed over were his dad and brother. My so's mother, L, was abusive. She frequently hit her husband, was a compulsive liar, and just generally made her family miserable. When they were settling the divorce, the judge initially deemed a testimony from the kids, my so and her brother, unnecessary. Probably because they were minors at the time and testifying against one of their parents would be hard on them, to say the least. However, the lawyer representing L was really insistent that they testify. Well, it must have been a shock to the lawyer to suddenly have 2 more witnesses with dozens of accounts of driving under the influence. Domestic violence. Ect. We figured L must have lied to her lawyer about some significant details because they were completely caught off guard and more than a little angry after the testimony. We like to believe it helped solidify some of the criminal charges placed against her. It was a nice bit of karma after years and years of gaslighting and false rumors that her own lies got her caught. When I had to go to the US Attorney's office to view the evidence in his case, there they were. The hundreds of images of child porn he had traded. The close-up images of his baby's genitals that he had taken and sent around the internet. The pictures of his neighbor's daughters playing in their kiddie pool. Realized he just could not help himself. But he also never once claimed responsibility or showed remorse. So I don't feel too badly for him. My best friend worked courts as a US Marshal for the first 2 or so years of his career. He'd tell stories of when they prosecuted kiddie diddlers and they entered thousands of images into the record. and the jury had to view all of them, as each was an exhibit of evidence. He knew better and didn't look at the monitors. But he told stories of jurors starting to cry, shaking with rage, and even vomiting after seeing too much incredibly awful stuff. The trials took forever because the jurors would have to take recesses to calm down. There are some messed up people in the world. Man. Late to the party, but anyways. My first internship in law school was at a matrimonial law firm in a very wealthy area. Think millionaires and billionaires getting divorced. One of the first cases I worked on involved the parents of a victim of a high-profile school shooting. The parents were divorced and had been prior to the death of the child, and were now battling over who would get the victim's compensation fund money and the funds they received from a fundraiser they set up themselves on a GoFundMe type site. These were incredibly wealthy people fighting over what was literal chump change to them and asking the public to donate to them as if they needed it. They were so clearly exploiting the death of their child for money and to piss off the other parent. It was honestly one of the most disturbing things I have encountered. Ever. Not a lawyer, but work for a law firm as an investigator. One of our clients stabbed an ex-lover multiple times over $100. Perp then ran out of the house all bloody. Neighbor and her teenage daughter see him covered in blood and rush inside to see if they can help while they call 911. Victim is still alive. On the 9/11 call the daughter made, you can hear the mom singing Amazing Grace while she tried to stop the bleeding. You can also hear the victim, with a stab wound in her neck, gurgling on blood while she tries to sing along. The EMTs arrived in under 3 minutes, but it took the police 19 minutes from the call to show up to clear the scene for them. She lived for 17 minutes. I saw the photos of the scene with the body still in place. It looked like a scene straight from Dexter. Basically, he was watching his neighbor through the window and various stages of undress. Got worked up. Minutes later the victim showed up at his shop to purchase some food. She was alone. He closed the door behind her and yeah. Well, that's it. Prick got 25 years for that. That girl was 7 F-king years old. You have no idea how often in our country the mentality of, well, if I'm worked up and there is a possibility of release close by, regardless of whom or what age or consenting or not that possibility is or might be, I'm entitled to take its surfaces. Welcome to South Africa. The adverts on TV showing Table Mountain and the ocean is a load of shit. 47 violent murders every day. 1 in 3 of every woman killed is murdered by her own spouse or partner. I saw this play out in court. Plaintiff was a prison guard who was forced to have oral sex with her boss, the warden, on a number of occasions. The warden threatened to have her fired and blackballed if she refused or blew the whistle. After this carried on for a long while, she quit and filed a lawsuit. But unfortunately her idiot lawyer didn't timely file with the correct authorities. At the end of the day, her claim was barred and the warden enjoyed sovereign immunity. At the hearing, you could see the judge asking the prison guard questions to see if there was a workaround or some way for her complaint to survive the pending motion to dismiss. But there wasn't. That was hard to watch. It was even worse when the prison guard began to quietly cry. Fortunately, the warden wasn't at the hearing. The attorney representing the state was professional and just focused on the legal arguments. He dipped out of the hearing in a hurry. Had a client charged with bestiality with his pet goat. Pictures of his undies full of goat hair and his bed littered with goat poo was something the like I have never seen in my career. When after the charges were dismissed, he asked me for help getting the goat back. Not a lawyer, but friend's dad is. He had a 48-year-old manager from a janky sub shop that was trying to sue his 16-year-old employee for defamation after the 48-year-old took the 16-year-old's phone and was looking at the nudes of his 16-year-old girlfriend and attempting to send them to himself. The kid went and told everybody and the manager found out and tried to sue him. Like, you dumb FCK. Why would you go and tell a legal team that you got caught attempting to put child PRN on your phone? FCK man. Lifelong criminal defense lawyer here. To be completely honest, it's not about the offense but about the person. I've had people accused of murder that I really kind of liked and thought well of. I've had people accused of shoplifting who have given me the heebie-jeebies and seemed like psychopaths. Speaking from purely a criminal standpoint, having a client who is a monster doesn't matter in terms of your duty to them, but it does make the job less pleasant. My worst clients have been people who are comfortable scamming others of their money. Not a lawyer but a client of one. I overheard a case of this woman wanting her U.S. citizenship, married an older man who was never hands-on. Basically, when the man went to file taxes, he had someone do it for him. She made a deal with this person. They transferred his entire estate and accounts to her. But her citizenship hadn't been fully established, as this was roughly a week into the false marriage. All of the older gentleman's money and assets were frozen because a foreign citizen owned them. The case is still stuck in legal hell and I don't know what happened later. Yutinaya Jama stole my twist. Murder, robbery, and most crimes involve regular people who did or may have done something stupid due to alcohol or situations. But the client you keep an eye out are the ones charged with fraud and the like. Liars, cheats, and all around shady people, generally speaking. Even the gangs operate on a code of conduct. An old-fashioned warlike code of conduct. Honor and courage are important to them even though they commit crimes. 22 years threatened twice. So not that bad. The real danger? Not in criminal law. It's family law. That's where people get really heated. It's personal. Prosecutor here. Most of us in this profession have the utmost respect for those on the other side of the aisle. Most people really don't know or understand the really fked up shit that we have to witness and deal with on a daily basis. There's a reason attorneys have the highest percentage of alcoholics by profession. I'm a civil litigator. I've never thought my client is a monster. But there are a few I've thought were idiots or liars or both. Two of my favorites are a client who instructed me, against my advice, to object to the temporary judge even though we had just discussed it and I had just told the f-king judge we were okay with him. And a client who testified pretty much the exact opposite of what she had told me in our initial meetings and what we had repeatedly discussed. Not a lawyer but I worked in a federal prison. Several inmates come to mind but the one I'll tell about is a former Catholic priest. He'd given up his vocation years before but he got caught up in a child PRN sting. At that time sentencing was based on how many images a suspect had. He had thousands and was facing a maximum of 40 years. The guy was in his 50s, so that would have been essentially a genuine life sentence. Since federal inmates can only earn 15% good time. At his sentencing hearing. And I read this transcript so I know this as a fact. He told the judge when he was a priest he'd molested hundreds of young boys. Despite treatment and his own remorse, he felt completely incapable of stopping his obsession with child PRN and with molestation. He had not ever been even charged with these crimes, but he felt guilty enough to admit them and then ask the judge to impose the full penalty so he'd be locked up for the rest of his life. A former teacher told the story of an instance where he was assigned by the court to defend a woman accused of child abuse. When he saw the cigarette burns all over the kid's arms, he knew she was clearly guilty, but he still had to defend her. I had a professor in college who was a defense lawyer prior to being a professor. He told us the reason why he decided to stop defending people. He had a client who was accused of raping a teenage girl. From what I remember from his story, there was no DNA evidence to point to the client. The client was adamant to my professor that he was completely innocent. My professor argued in court at the trial and was successful in defending his client and got him acquitted. After everything was all said and done, he and his client went out to dinner to celebrate the victory. My professor said they were talking about some random topic when the man picked up his drink. Said, "You know." He then took a sip and said, "I think she liked it." My professor recalled that the smirk on the guy's face made him want to vomit. About 2 months ago, one of my clients picked up a statute book off the defense table and knocked me over the head with it during a probation violation hearing. That wasn't a great day at work. Law and Order SVU writers are salivating.